Okay, good morning. Today, we're going to deal with my proposed thesis. And more specifically, we're going to address the issue of African American delinquency in the public school system and the subsequent inability to get into schools of higher education or perform on a level equal to others in higher education. To address this issue, our research will review the various known causes associated with this problem acknowledged by researchers. During the colonial period in the North American colonies, it was determined that there was no need to teach slaves how to read. Furthermore, it was believed by some and subsequently stated that slaves did not have the capacity to learn how to read or to think for themselves or live independently of their slave owners because they were mentally inferior. This same attitude was perpetuated long after the institution of slavery was officially abolished, and still appears to be the belief within the minds of some involved in the education of minority children and adults today in this modern and postmodern age. Admittedly, not everyone that was Caucasian in the colonial period upheld this idea that slaves couldn't read. Some just did not want slaves to read for fear that the slave who learned how to read was more dangerous than one who possessed a weapon. The premise behind this fear was that those in control did not want a slave learning to read because he or she would then know what was perpetuated in churches and in the dominant culture about slaves was merely a fabrication and not something which was substantiated in the Bible nor scientifically. The research done by Edward Bell points to the fact that a factor in the development of African American students in school academically is contingent on the self esteem which these individuals possess. This, of course, was known by those who possessed slaves during the colonial period. They understood that in order to control a slave, one had to control his or her mind. And when they had succeeded in controlling the mind, they could more easily control their bodies and have the slave to remain subservient for the duration of his or her existence as a slave. A similar approach was used by those who had possession of baby elephants. If the elephant were led to believe that it was incapable of freeing itself from the shackle that it had to the post, that had held it to the post, where its owner had placed it in the ground, that elephant would become convinced mentally that it was unable to free itself even after becoming an adult and physically possessing the strength to break free from the shackle. Although one might not see the comparison at first between the lives of a slave or the life of a slave and that which I just stated in comparison to an elephant, here's the similarity or how they coincide. An elephant, of course, does not and never will learn how to read. But the similarity lies in the fact that both had been conditioned to accept their circumstances and to tolerate such because they had come to believe what was expected of them, which was to remain subservient. In the research done by Lauren T. Bundy, the schools are killing our kids. In the schools that are killing our kids, she deals with the problem of segregation and the government's involvement in desegregating the school system in Boston. Her research serves as a reminder to some and a revelation to others that segregation not only impact or impacts schools and societies in the South, but also affected Boston and other regions throughout the United States. Bundy's work addresses the grassroots movement led by blacks in Boston before the official start of the civil rights movement. It covers the period from the late 1940s to the early 1980s, which involved Black parents, teachers, and students who engaged in school boycotts, the creation of freedom schools, independent alternative schools, and lobby efforts to change the segregated school system in Boston. While addressing this issue, the research examines the evolution of the goals along with the ideology and strategies used during the 4-decade-long struggle for change, in addition to showing the correlation between the movement in Boston with that which existed elsewhere in the country. More specifically, the research addresses the issue of the busing crisis and in opposition to desegregation by declaring an opposition to busing rather than the real issue of resistance to the advancement of minorities. Transcending this, the research opens the conversation to the issue of various marginalized groups in their struggle since the 1940s and the need for a transformation of the political system. Another researcher dealing with the problem of the school system put forth research entitled The Power of Parental Engagement to address the importance of parental involvement in their children's early educational development in the school system and in the methods that provide that which is best for such an engagement. This research, which was conducted by Christina A. McCoy, focused on the education of African American children in the area of reading and mathematics. In her writing, McCoy admitted that the problem of excelling in reading and mathematics is not a new problem, but a persistent one. While acknowledging that this has been known as a racial problem and it has contributed to systematic racism, a lack of cultural awareness, and barriers to parental engagement. McCoy emphasizes the importance of parental engagement in dealing with this problem. Her research indicates that parental involvement involves making a difference in the parental involvement makes a difference in children's development. And she indicated that this was evidenced by the grades of these particular children that increased, their attendance increased, and those children whose parents were actively involved did not get suspended from school as often as those who did not have parents involved in their education. McCoy's research, which used the ECLS K 2011 data to analyze which types of parental involvement work best, indicates that the three approaches did work well. And these, which he stated, were a parent's involvement in the child's learning, a parent's involvement in their schooling, and the parent's involvement at the child's school. To analyze each category covered, McCoy used what was referred to as correlation co-effects. The primary sources that I have just conveyed was that which was done by Edward E. Bell, The Impact of Self-Esteem and Identification with Academics on the Academic Achievement of African American Studies, put out in his dissertation at Liberty University in 2009. The other was by Lauren Tess Bundy in her paper referred to as The Schools Are Killing Our Kids, the African American Fight for Self-Determination in the Boston Public Schools from 1949 to 1985. This was done in her dissertation work provided to the University of Maryland. And lastly, the research that I referred to was that done by Christina A. McCoy in The Power of Parental Engagement, an examination of the effect of the ECLSK home and school-based parental engagement categories that have on kindergarten to fifth grade, Black non-Hispanic students reading and mathematics IRT achievement data from different socioeconomic statuses. And this was done with the Notre Dame of Maryland University in Baltimore. Hopefully, something that I said was useful and that you would indeed seek to pursue more information on this subject. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good day.